So after the news a couple of months ago that Travis Kelce had tried to meet Taylor Swift backstage at one of her concerts, reports today, according to The Messenger, which I guess is some sort of social media pop culture news outlet of some kind,
Gossip
Taylor
brag.
Swift
Yeah.
and NFL player Travis Kelce have been, quote, quietly hanging out. Your thoughts?
It's hard for either of them to do anything quiet.
That is very
but
true.
I'm sure they've at least I bet tons of people on both sides were like, hey, this would be cool. You should try this.
Sure.
A
lot
I
of
wonder what
mutuals
happens
trying to get them
first.
together.
Exactly. I wonder what happens first. Taylor at a Chiefs game or a breakup song about Travis.
Well, it's hard to say. I know that this was sort of my introduction to the world of Swifties. I know that they exist. I know that they're hardcore. And we discussed before the show, we weren't going to make this an official news segment because I don't need them finding out about the podcast. Like I'll take on
Review
Patriots
bombing
fans
us.
on X. I'll take on Bengals fans. I'll take on Bills fans. I'll take on any NFL fan base before I would ever attempt to battle with the Swifty fan base. But they've been doing a deep dive on our guy. I did see one of them today talk about the ring from his divorced wife or something. And I was like, I think you maybe need to check your information. Like maybe you need to fact check a little bit. But I mean, they're out there, asking each other, like, who is this guy? What can we what's our scouting report on him? Like what can we dig up about this dude? Because listen, they have strong feelings about Taylor Swift.
They do. Extremely strong as any group of people have towards one individual in the history of the world, probably. And I'm worried that they're going to try and dig up dirt on Trav. And Trav, as we know, has not had much dirt in years, right? He's been a pretty clean character since his youth. And I just wonder if they're going to see a clip of him freaking out and throwing a towel at a ref and thinking that that's like 2023 Travis Kelce. Sure. And be like, this guy's a hothead. Taylor doesn't need that in her life, blah, blah, blah. And like, look, he was a kid when he was doing all that stuff. He's matured now. They're around the same age. She was obviously born in 1989. So he's 33. They're right there.
I think he was also born in 1989, wasn't he?
Yeah. He was. So,
same age.
I feel like it could work. It could be cool. I think, she's extremely likable from like a macro perspective as like just on a person level. And I know, you're going to hear Patriots fans say that Travis Kelce is a bro and an idiot and a douche or whatever, but like pretty much outside of Boston, everyone agrees that like Trav's awesome. And
he rules.
They would be cool together.
Swifties, I have a message for you. Don't ruin this for Trav, for Taylor, for all of us. Welcome in to It's Always Sunny in Chiefs Kingdom. I'm Austin. Find me on Twitter /X at Real Bird Lawyer. I'm also now on Blue Sky at Bird Law Expert. I haven't posted there yet, but I have it. I'm going to go down with the X ship before I ever start posting there. I'll try and send you an invite, by the way, because I think I get a new code every couple of weeks. But here with me, as always, my co-host Taylor at Taylor_Wit on X, on Threads. What's going on, buddy?
Not much. I'm actually not at Taylor Underwit on Threads, but it doesn't matter because I haven't checked Threads since the day it came out, and I don't think anyone has actually. It happens. People try and duplicate what was magical Twitter for 10 plus years, and I don't think they could do it. I don't think X can do it. I think our days of having an enjoyable social media experience are behind us.
They're behind us, and they're rapidly declining. But until the lights turn off, we'll be there. Brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. If you missed out on Underdog doing your preseason best ball drafts for the entire season, don't worry, because you can still draft. You can still draft every week. You can still draft from here to the end of the season. This is one of the things that's great about best ball. If you wanted to do a fantasy league that started in week 2, all your friends would say, that's stupid. Why didn't we start in week 1? But with best ball, since there's no lineup changes, there's no additions, whatever, you could just hop in, do a draft right now. You don't have to set your lineups. You don't have to make any pickups the rest of the season. You can avoid drafting Aaron Rodgers. Oof, we'll talk about that. Oof. Use our promo code Sunny, SUNNY, to get a match deposit up to your first $100. We got a great show for you guys. We're recording this on a Tuesday, which is a little bit abnormal for us, but we decided it's been a couple of days since the game. We were at the game. We had a bachelor party last weekend after the game, so we're recovered from that. But it's also been, a few days since the game. It was a Thursday night game. We figured we wanted to get out here, do a show. It's going to be a little early for our game preview and a little late for our game recap, but we're going to get it all in. We've got news. We've got what is happening. We've got our week 1 recap, and we've got our week 2 preview. But let's start with news. Chris Jones.
Yay!
Normally we start with the injury news. Usually, almost always, unless there's Chris Jones news, and there is finally Chris Jones news, and it's good Chris Jones news. He's back after accruing over $1 million in non-refundable fines and missing out on a $1 million+ game check to watch opening night from the suite with his agents Tweedledee and Tweedledum. He is back. He has signed a new 1-year deal. They did rip up his existing contract, and they re-signed a new 1-year deal. He's back. Your thoughts?
A lot of thoughts. A lot of just relief and catharsis for this whole thing being behind us now. Really perplexed at what he thought he accomplished here. We'll talk about that. But just in general, the team's better with Chris Jones. We've said it the whole time. I was frustrated with kind of how things unfolded, but at the end of the day, there was no good outcome that involved Chris Jones not being a Chief in 2023. And fortunately, yes, he missed a game. Yes, the Chiefs lost that game, but all things considered, and especially given the landscape of the rest of the AFC, which we'll talk about, could be worse. Could be a lot worse.
Yeah, as we discussed, I think Monday morning before this news broke, the sooner the better. I mean, obviously it became apparent, especially after week 1, that the Chiefs weren't going to budge on this. He wasn't going to get what he wanted. And at that point, the clear, correct decision was for him to come back as soon as possible and start earning what money he had left on his deal. And, better late than never. He's here. You mentioned the contract itself. So his new deal replaces his existing contract. He is still only under contract for 2023. He will still be a free agent next year, although the Chiefs can still tag him. We'll talk about that. His new contract is going to pay him the same base salary, but he's going to lose the fines in the game 1 check. So effectively, he goes from a $19.5 million base salary to a $16.4 million base salary. He will have the opportunity to make that back and some extra with incentives. So the incentive structure basically is as follows. If he essentially duplicates 2022, just in terms of his own personal performance, he'll come pretty close to breaking even. He'll still be a little bit shy of what he would have made if he had just showed up to training camp and showed up in week 1 and played in week 1.
Jesus.
He'll be close. If he replicates his Defensive Player of the Year finalist 2022 season with 15 sacks, to actually make significantly more money, he will not only have to outperform his 2022 season and win Defensive Player of the Year, but the Chiefs will have to win the Super Bowl again. Like, to get to $25 million, which is the upper limit of what he can make now, he has to basically have the best season of his career, win the hardware at the end of the season, both individual and team hardware. And like you said, I don't know what he accomplished. This was a dumb holdout, and it ended predictably in a dumb fashion.
It did. So not to hash the details out too much, but I have heard conflicting reports on the upper end of his contract this year.
Oh,
just from people that know their stuff, not just people tweeting. Like, these are cap experts and stuff. So Seth Kaiser, friend of the show, love him, had a really good article about the upper limits, the earning, all that stuff. He unlocked it on his Substack. You can go check him out if you're not following Seth. Make sure you go hit up Real MN Chiefs Fan for that. But he actually was looking at a number that showed more closer to 23 million on the upper level instead of 25, based on some stuff with I'm trying to pull the exact person that he quoted because I didn't know him. Oh, Jason from Over the Cap. And so all that is to say, whether it's 25, whether it's 23, it's certainly not 30. It's certainly not something that Chris Jones, a significant amount over 19 to me is like 8-9 million more just this year alone. And that's, he's not getting that. So it's dumb. It's bad for Chris. It's a huge, mega, ultra L. One of the biggest L's in contract negotiations we've seen since Le'Veon Bell. I mean, really, since Chris's friend also held out and also got no money from it. And so it was.
And Le'Veon's agent was never heard from again.
And I wouldn't be shocked if we hear the same about the Katz brothers. I wouldn't be shocked if Chris fires them at the end of the season. I mean, I would have been shocked if he fired him today when they announced the deal. But point being, the Katz just misread the entire situation, as you will do when you don't have any mega big contracts under your belt. You don't really understand how the game works. They made a bet that the Chiefs week 1 were going to come out and they were going to get gashed by the Lions. They were going to get, the defensive line was going to look like they couldn't stop a nosebleed. Everyone was going to say, well, this team without Chris Jones is nothing. They can't compete. That's the only way they were going to win. That's the only way they were going to hold the Chiefs hostage, which is what they were doing, and say, you have to pay our ransom money of $30 million a year for Chris Jones, because otherwise you're dead in the water. The Chiefs proved they're not dead in the water. We'll talk about the game, here in a little bit, but like the defense was fine without Chris Jones. Sure. And so they basically, as I said last week, played chicken with a train, and the train ran them over. And so this is their big, and I loved Brett Veach coming out and saying all the kind of snide. I mean, it was a statement, but he said,
very hard on his behalf.
There were two things that were apparent. Chris Jones really wanted to be a Chief, and the Katz brothers worked really hard on his behalf. And then obviously with the release of the information, I mean, Brett knew, everyone knew the Katz brothers were going to look a fool. And that's exactly what happened.
Let's talk about the final piece of this new deal for Chris Jones. And that is that he got no protection against being franchise tagged next year, which, I mean, honestly, he got nothing out of this. Chris did tweet that he got it all back. That's not quite correct. And It certainly isn't true in terms of his leverage for 2024, because the Chiefs can franchise tag him next season, and they could do it for around $30 million, which is a lot of money. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it's a ton of money for a non-quarterback to put him on a $30 million tag, but it's a slight discount from the $32 million it would have been if he had never held out and he had actually played in week 1. So he actually makes it a little bit easier for the Chiefs to franchise tag him next year. The fact that the Chiefs can tag him at all obviously gives them leverage to trade him, tag and trade him if they are not able to reach a long-term deal. And at this point, I guess we should, close this discussion with, it seems like this is probably going to be his last season in Kansas City, which is a bummer, but it is what it is.
I see that take going around a lot. I'm not sure I agree. And I think that, I mean, you're certainly right that it's on the table. You're certainly right that now more than any time in Chris Jones' tenure with the Chiefs looks like it's coming towards a close. But I think a lot of people are assuming that this is the last year because they didn't get the extension done. But I just feel like Chris has spoken so highly, even throughout this contentious process, so highly about wanting to be a Chief for life. Like that has been something that he has said before the negotiations, during the negotiations, and now after the negotiations. And this didn't go out. This didn't go well at all for him. And maybe if he, you see players not have training camp and stuff like that and come out flat and maybe get injured or maybe something like that. He's in his late 20s. Like there's a chance that he flops this year performance-wise, and the Chiefs decide hey, had a good run. Thanks for coming out. We'll send you on your way. But if he comes out,
your Ring of Fame induction,
we still have a good relationship with you, but we're not going to pursue a big contract because we don't think that, we think your best days are behind you, etc. That could certainly happen. They could break up. But I do think that if he comes out and he plays inspired, and frankly, I mean, this is the ultimate contract year because it's as performance based as you can get.
He's playing for this year and for next year.
He is, and he's playing for millions of dollars that he knows he fumbled. He knows that he had a $54 million guaranteed deal that he turned down just to take, between 19 and 25. And it's so he's going to, at least, if nothing else, be as motivated as anyone can be playing football. And maybe that translates, and maybe he comes out and he's as close to or DPOI or something along those lines. And if he does, I think the vibes between he and the Chiefs would be good. And I think they would work out something next year, given that they both didn't want to go through what they did this last year. They saw how ugly it was. And like, I don't know. I don't think it's written in the stars that Chris Jones' last year in Kansas City is this year, but it's on the table, certainly on the table.
I think it probably does depend a little bit on whether he secures new representation or not. I mean, I think if he comes out and says, you guys screwed up to the Katz brothers and lets them go and hires a new agent, I mean, like, it really comes down to, I think Chris has to evaluate whether he wants the bag or whether he wants to be a Chief for life. Because I don't think we're going to find ourselves in a situation a year from now where he's on the brink of unrestricted free agency, or the franchise tag, where a team is going to pay him, where the Chiefs are going to be the highest bidder for his services.
The Chiefs are never going to be the highest bidder for anybody.
Right. And so we're just going to have to see. But obviously, in the short term, it's great to have him back on the ultimate contract year, his last season in his 20s, motivated, playing for that trophy, playing for that $2 million for winning the Super Bowl. Let's do it. Let's talk about the injuries now. When we recorded the Week 1 preview, which we did a little bit early because we had Randy Gisarelli on the show. If you did not catch that episode, obviously some of it was Week 1 related and some of it was undefeated season related, which that's already out the window. But we love having Randy on. It was a great conversation. Obviously, a lot of big picture stuff, which we always like to go over with him. All that to say that when we previewed the game last week, we didn't know that Travis Kelce wasn't going to play. We didn't even know that he was going to get hurt. Like, he was completely 100% healthy at the time that we press report on that podcast and sent it to print. And then on the last practice of the Chiefs, or near the end of the last practice of the week on Monday for the Chiefs, he hyperextended his knee. He ends up missing Week 1. The good news, of course, is that there was no structural damage. And man, that kind of like, I'm almost glad that we sort of got delayed reporting on that. Like, the first report to come out about that was like, the knee's intact. It's like, well, we never really even knew that there was a possibility that it wasn't intact. I feel
he's alive, guys.
Which, like, thank God for that, because that would have been a rough night, Monday into Tuesday, sweating that out. But no structural damage. His season is going to go forward just fine. It's a deep bone bruise. Sounds like he's trending in the right direction for Week 2. He did New Heights, the Kelce Brothers podcast, did release a preview of the episode tomorrow, in which he let us know that he was keeping the stash and he wanted to unleash the power of the stash on the field in sometime this year. And he said
Week 2.
Week 2. So I'd say that's a pretty good indication that he's going to play in Week 2. Regarding injuries for Week 1, again, we're recording this a little bit early, so we don't have the benefit of our first injury report for Week 2. But Andy Reid did come out after the game on Thursday, said no new injuries from week 1. So barring any surprises, it sounds like the Chiefs are going to be at pretty much full health going into Week 2.
And not only full health, but I mean, if Chris Jones and Travis Kelce walk in that building, plus everyone that played in Week 1 with a 1-point loss to a pretty damn good Detroit team, I mean, that's a good combo. That's a good situation to be in. And, it's still early. Obviously, not every AFC team, not every AFC contender can say that they came out of Week 1 without any major injuries. So that Chiefs got to count their blessings there.
That'll do it for the injuries. Let's talk about
what is happening.
This is my favorite what is happening in the year, Taylor, because football is back. Week 1 is in the books, and so much happened. It's actually absurd. So for those of you who may be new to this segment, this is the segment where we talk about things that are happening that don't involve the Chiefs, things that are happening around the NFL, as it were. Also a great podcast, and we can't steal that. So it's what is happening. Let's start with what happened last night on Monday Night Football, and we'll get into the game. I want to actually do the results of the game last. But what happened is on 9/11, noted 9/11 enthusiast Aaron Rodgers, quarterback of the New York Jets, quarterback of the New York Jets, was running onto the field with his American flag, waving that in front of 80,000 screaming Jets fans. I mean, really, like, probably one of the most hyped moments in the history of the New York Jets franchise. And 4 plays into the game, he drops back, he's sacked. His calf ripples, it's torn Achilles. He's out for the year, and he might be done for good. He's 39 years old. An Achilles injury is a grueling rehab. He obviously will turn 40 later this year in December, I believe. It's it's a tough scene, but just a shocking turn of events for Aaron Rodgers and the New York Jets.
Yeah, I've been trying to process this from a lot of different perspectives, and much like Aaron Rodgers' Achilles, I'm torn here. It on the one hand, the human element, you feel for everybody that cares about the New York Jets. If you feel for Aaron Rodgers, I'm not his biggest fan by any means, but there's no part of me that, is happy that he, tore his Achilles. That's a brutal injury. It's hard to come back from. I mean, some people say it's the hardest injury to come back from in football. It's just so. On the other hand, from a competitive, these guys are millionaires, let's think about what the effect is on everyone. It's interesting. And I know that's not going to be a popular take right now, but there were too many contenders in the AFC already. And the Jets prepared this season, going into the season, with a 39-year-old quarterback and a shitty offensive line. That's a bad combo.
And Zach Wilson is the backup.
They didn't have a backup plan for Rodgers. Exactly. And, I mean, he was not very trusting of his offensive line. We saw that through Hard Knocks, that he was frustrated with their play. The Jets tried to go out and draft some tackles in the draft. They kept getting sniped. They kept every early round. They had tackles on their list, but they didn't trade up for them. The tackles would get taken. And they didn't sign any major ones in free agency. They tried to move Mekhi Becton over to right. He's missed whatever it was, 36 out of the last 39 of his NFL games or whatever. They have, I think, 38-year-old Dwayne Brown at left tackle, it's not a good situation for the Jets on their offensive line. And to see their old quarterback get hurt 4 plays into the season, it's just not very surprising to me.
No.
And it sucks for the lifetime suffering New York Jets fans. I feel for them. I've had no animosity towards the Jets ever in my life, because how could you? They've been a doormat for everybody, and they're just not there. There's no reason that the Jets should have made anyone mad up until now. But I don't know. I don't really like New York sports fans that much. I kind of, think about Yankees fans and stuff like that. It just doesn't really, I don't have a ton of sympathy for him, I guess. So I'm torn. Like I said, I have a lot of different conflicting emotions here, and it is too bad. And it does make the NFL season, less competitive, maybe more interesting though.
We'll talk about the results of this game in a little bit, but for now, I mean, suffice to say, Aaron Rodgers out for the year. Jets apparently rolling with Zach Wilson. We'll see if they pick up another quarterback, and I'm sure we'll talk about that if it's anybody worth talking about. But let's talk about some of the other results from this weekend, because obviously when the Chiefs go 0-1 to start the season, lose the first game of the year, boy, we had to wait 3 days of people. Unfortunately, we were at a bachelor party getting hammered drunk. So we didn't spend a lot of time taking this abuse online, but there was a lot of abuse being handed out. Chiefs start the season 0-1. They lose to the Lions. Never mind the fact that the Lions are a good team. The Chiefs were missing Travis Kelce and Chris Jones. It was funny to people, and people have been praying for a downfall, and they got it for a whole 3 days. But then Sunday came around, and other games were played, and we get to talk about those games, and we get to dunk on other people. So let's start with the Cincinnati Bengals. And since we last recorded the podcast, Joe Burrow became the highest paid player in NFL history with a 5-year, $275 million extension. That will pay him $55 million per year. That will keep him in Cincinnati until 2030, which is his age 34 season. He's now
until they trade him when they're terrible. Keep going.
Sure, right, of course. I don't know if he's got a no trade clause or not, but yeah, I mean, that's always a possibility. There's also a possibility that he's not good. We'll talk about that in a second too. He's now making $10 million a year more than Patrick Mahomes, who, despite signing his extension 3 years ago, will still be a Chief until at least 2032. So at least two years longer than Burrow will be a Bengal. Brett Veach, mastermind.
Yeah. Let's
talk about what happened the day after he signed this giant extension. Well, actually not the day after, because we should mention that this contract was done last Thursday morning, and it was first announced to the media during the Chiefs game.
At kickoff.
And it was announced, it was reported that the Bengals had deliberately done this, essentially to steal the Chiefs spotlight. I do not feel bad for them at all. And any misfortune that befalls that franchise, they completely deserve. Let's talk about what happened to them on Sunday. They went to Cleveland to play the moribund Cleveland Browns franchise, literally one of the worst franchises in NFL history.
In sports history, yep.
And Joe Burrow promptly turned in by far the worst performance of his NFL career to date. Like, not even close. It was so bad. He went 14 for 31 for 82 yards. His team lost 24-3 to the Browns. The Bengals went 2 of 15 on third down. They had their lowest single game success rate rushing the ball since the 1990s.
Ooh, I hadn't seen that. Spicy.
Depending on who you ask, former Chief Orlando Brown Jr. allowed 3 pressures if you ask PFF, or 1 pressure if you ask Bengals fans. Either way, Joe Burrow was running for his life. He did not look good in this game. In fact, he looked terrible. The Bengals looked awful, and they are also 0-1.
They had objectively the worst week of any team not named the New York Jets. I mean, worse than the New York Giants, who lost 40-0, because the Bengals had, and have Super Bowl aspirations, and they rely on their potent offense. That's where everything happens. And to see, it was a little rainy, obviously, but the rain's never stopped anybody from throwing the football before. It slows you down a little bit, but certainly 82 yards. It wasn't a monsoon. And
82 yards.
82 yards is pathetic. That's a pathetic performance. They could not ever get anything going. Their first drives went punt, 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out, punt, 3 and out, 3 and out. I mean, insane. Finally caught a field goal at the start of the second half. So they sucked. They sucked bad. They sucked against a division opponent. I mean, they're already, a game back in the AFC standings. When you look at the conference at the end of the year with the tiebreakers and your conference record and stuff, they're a game back in the North. Just a big time fail by the Bengals.
And you mentioned the potent offense. Obviously, that's part of what has made the Bengals successful. But their defense kind of got worked in this game. They gave up 200 yards on the ground on 40 carries. And listen, the Browns are great at running the ball. We get that. They're good at running the ball, but they got run over in this game. And Deshaun Watson, who also looked terrible in this game, he threw for 154 yards on 29 attempts, which is 2 fewer than Joe Burrow, and he threw for almost twice as many yards. It's not like he was the only. It's not like Burrow's the only guy playing in the rain, right? And Deshaun Watson isn't throwing to T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, right? He's throwing to Amari Cooper and Elijah Moore, and he's terrible and he's not good. So he was the best quarterback on the field, and that is a damning indictment of Joe Burrow. I mean, listen, I think Joe Burrow is probably really good, but I don't know. I mean, the guy's had legitimately top 3 weapons for his entire NFL career. He had that at LSU when he had that amazing, one of the best seasons in college, arguably the best season by a college football quarterback ever. But he was throwing to Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase
in college.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
So, in any case,
we'll put a bow on Burrow when we talk about Allen a little bit later. But the conversation around these big time AFC quarterbacks is taking an interesting turn.
It is taking an interesting turn. Let's talk about the division. Let's talk about the AFC West. And let's talk about first the Los Angeles Chargers. Now, they got into a good old-fashioned shootout with the Fighting Tuas, the Miami Dolphins. And despite having a new offensive coordinator in Kellen Moore, Justin Herbert threw for just 228 yards on 33 attempts, so 6.9 yards per attempt. And meanwhile, Tua Tagovailoa, with his little noodle arm, went out there to LA and threw for 466 yards.
I don't think he has a noodle arm anymore, buddy. I think
on 45 attempts, that's 10.4 yards per attempt. And honestly, to your point, he made some throws in this game that I did not think that Tua was capable of making. He made a throw to our old friend Tyreek Hill on the move, on the money, 40 yards down the field, which I've never seen Tua make that play before, and I don't know if he's going to consistently make that play going forward, but it was eye-opening for sure. Tua's average depth of target since the start last season is 3 yards deeper than Justin Herbert. So on average, every single play, 600 times over the course of the season, he's throwing 3 yards deeper than Herbert. And that's not how many yards they gained. That's how far they're throwing the ball.
Yeah.
And listen, Justin Herbert, like, he's got a new offensive coordinator. He doesn't have Joe Lombardi anymore. That's just kind of who he is. He's not a risk taker. He's not a gunslinger. Nope. So what ended up happening in this game is the Chargers actually get a lead in this game, only to have Tyreek Hill, who went 11 for 215 and 2 touchdowns, give the Dolphins a lead after just an absolutely monster second half where he was just cooking them on every single play. And then with the game on the line, the Chargers go 4 and out. They get a first down and then go intentional grounding, sack, completion, sack. Chargers are 0-1. They're tied with the Chiefs in last place in the AFC West.
They had a really interesting week. Their offense looked fine, like you said. Herbert is not who the Chargers think Herbert is. I don't think he's probably not even who we think he is.
Because he always plays differently against us.
He does, exactly. We have this picture of Justin Herbert as this, insane NFL quarterback, and every other time I check in with him when he's not playing the Chiefs, I'm like, where is that guy? Where is he?
Sure,
I even just want to see him. I don't want the Chargers to do well, but like, it's interesting when quarterbacks are really good, and like he just never brings that out. He only brings it out against the Chiefs, which is frustrating and dumb. But they obviously gave up a ton of points to the Dolphins. It'll be seen whether the Dolphins are going to do that to everybody, because Mike McDaniel's a genius and Tyreek Hill's one of one, and maybe Tua stays healthy for the full year, and maybe they realize that picking him, 6th overall in the draft was a good idea, and maybe that happens. Or actually, I think he was 5th and Herbert went 6th.
Yeah,
that's right. They're back-to-back picks. Yep. But until Tua completes a full season, and until the Dolphins kind of show it for longer than a 4 or 5 game stretch like they have so far, I just don't think that. I think it means more long-term that the Chargers lost this game than the Dolphins won it. I think It shows that the Chargers still, after all this time, after centuries of not being able to win close games, still can't do it. And yeah, you mentioned the yards per attempt. And I just thought it was really funny that in the NFL, of the 32 starting quarterbacks this week, Justin Herbert, 27th in intended air yards per attempt at 4.1. 28th is where his offensive coordinator went to, Joe Lombardi, Russell Wilson, 4.0. So Joe Lombardi is like this virus in the NFL. He grabbed Justin Herbert and he made him this shitty check down quarterback. And then he went over to Denver. He's doing the same thing. Maybe he's a secret sleeper agent for the Chiefs.
That would be great for us, obviously. But I think, again, this is kind of just who Herbert is. Joe Lombardi's not there anymore, and he's still checking it down. He just doesn't have that killer instinct that Tua Tagovailoa has. Justin Herbert does not. Let's talk about Denver, and let's go over to the Mile High City, because this game was intensely enjoyable to watch. Not because it was a good game of football. It was not. But because the result was hilarious. The much-hyped Sean Payton Broncos welcoming the Las Vegas Raiders to town. Sean Payton opened this game with the most Sean Payton play call of all time. It was a onside kick of the opening kickoff to remind everybody watching the game, that remember 13 years ago when Sean Payton won a Super Bowl in New Orleans? He totally went for an onside kick, right after halftime. They recovered it. They went on to beat the Colts, Peyton Manning, and they won the Super Bowl for New Orleans. It's literally like the most look at me, I'm the man play call of all time. And hilariously, even though they planned to do this, obviously, the entire week, and the
entire offseason, probably the
entire offseason, probably from the first day he went in there, he's like, Raiders, week 1, we're doing an onside kick on the opening kickoff. And it didn't work because one of their players touched the ball before it went 10 yards, which is literally the only thing you can't do on an onside kick. So they give the Raiders great field position. Raiders march down and score a touchdown. Russell Wilson was on fire. Joe Lombardi, Sean Payton calling plays, going 17 to 19 in the first half for an incredible 125 yards, 6.5 yards per attempt there. Really blistering, really pushing the ball, 3-4 yards downfield. Each pass. He did have a 129 passer rating, so you'd think the Broncos were really they were really cooking. I heard and saw plenty of Russ's cooking tweets. The Broncos scored 13 points in the first half. So, they went on to score 3 points in the second half for a total of 16. But you know what? Russell completed 79% of his passes for 177 yards. 5.2 yards per attempt, and you said it was 4 air yards per attempt?
4.0 air yards per attempt.
I'm telling you, this was the dinkiest, dunkiest offense of all time. It was definitely more of a ding than a dong. Russell Wilson, had the Broncos in position. They had a lead at halftime. They had a lead in the later stages of this game. But unfortunately for the Broncos, when the Raiders took a 17-16 lead in this game, a 1-point lead, Russell Wilson went 3 and out. They punted the ball back to Las Vegas with 5:08 left in the game. They had 2 timeouts in the 2-minute warning, and they never got the ball back. The Raiders kept the ball for over 5 minutes, despite 3 stoppages of the clock. They never gave the ball back. The final dagger was a Jimmy Garoppolo scramble on 3rd and 8 for a first down to ice the game. The Raiders have now won 7 straight against the Broncos.
There was some graphic during the game about longest winning streaks by one team against another, and the top 2 were teams over the Broncos with the Chiefs and Raiders.
It's utterly absurd, the situation the Broncos find themselves in. And listen, 16 points, you may recall, 16-17, 17-16. That was the score by which the Broncos lost week 1 in Seattle last year under Nathaniel Hackett. And this year, did they look better coached? I mean, yeah, I guess, but they still lost the game. They still only scored 16 points. They still did not look good. They are 0-1 and tied with the Chiefs for last place in the AFC West. Those Las Vegas Raiders 1-0, leading the division, just like we all expected.
I like checking in on Mile High Report, the SB Nation
Sure,
Broncos site. I've visited there more than, sorry to the friends at Arrowhead Pride, but it's just not as interesting to me to read about the Chiefs on a forum like SB Nation as it is to read what the other fans of the other teams think. So.
Sure.
Mile High Report was talking about the curse of 16, which I guess is a meme over there of scoring 16 points, because I guess they have 3 more games of scoring exactly 16 points than any other team in the league over the last 3 or 4 years. Like they've scored exactly 16, like 11 times or 9 times or whatever. And yes, you're right. They lost that week 1 game, but they also lost just some brutal games last year in the Nathaniel Hackett era, scoring exactly 16 points. So when they saw that score, they got mega triggered. And the reason that they had 16 and lost by 1 was because Will Lutz Ride missed an extra point. And so they're in it right now. I just want to point out some numbers from this game because they're funny. Justin Herbert and Russell Wilson, I know Herbert was in the other game, but they both intended exactly 135 air yards in their games on 33 and 34 attempts, which is why they were right next to each other. So that's 270 combined intended air yards between the 2 quarterbacks. 13 quarterbacks themselves intended more air yards in week 1 than the 2 of them combined, including the league-leading Tua Tagovailoa, who attempted 501 air yards in week 1. Mac Jones was second with 382 and Mahomes third at 379. So
sure,
that's just putrid. That's just not NFL offense. But then when you compare them to the Raiders, these numbers were really funny. First downs in the game. Raiders 22, Broncos 22, passing first downs, 11 for the Raiders, 11 for the Broncos, rushing first downs, 5 for each, first downs from penalties, 6 for each, third down efficiency for both teams, 5 for 11, exactly. Total plays, 55 for the Raiders, 58 for the Broncos. Yards per play, 4.7 for the Raiders, 4.5 for the Broncos, and then penalties, 10 for the Raiders for 97 yards, 10 for 83 for the Broncos. So the Broncos are basically the Raiders, which is not good for either team. Like that's
no, you don't want to be
as the Raiders, you don't want to be the Broncos. And as the Broncos, you don't want to be the Raiders. Like they're both not people that you need to aspire to be like. And they just basically played a mirror match. And if Lutz hadn't missed that extra point, they would have probably still be playing right now. And it's just really funny to me that those two teams match up the way they do. And despite Jimmy Garoppolo, only throwing 200 yards in that game, he still threw for 23 more yards than Russell Wilson. Just a very funny situation all around.
They would not still be playing because they would have tied in overtime, and then they'd both be 0-1, and they'd be a half game technically ahead of the Chiefs, but they'd be winless. It's too bad that we didn't get that result, but I also am glad that I didn't have to sit through an entire overtime period for those two games. Good for the Raiders. They're going to be easy to catch later on. They can build whatever lead they can build over the first 2 weeks of the season. We'll catch them down the stretch. Let's talk about the final team and the final game played on Monday Night Football. We already talked about the Jets and Aaron Rodgers and how we feel about that. They're obviously completely done as a possible AFC contender. And maybe so is the team that they played against and beat with Zach Wilson, the Buffalo Bills. So the Bills are up 13-3 in this game on the Zach Wilson Jets. I mean, Aaron Rodgers is out of the game on the first drive after 4 snaps. They know Zach Wilson is going to play the rest of the game. They know who Zach Wilson is because they played him. They played him, 5 or 6 times now since he's been drafted. They know that he's terrible. I mean, he had a terrible performance against the Bills last year, and Jets still won that game because Josh Allen was a bozo. Bozo Josh Allen came out in this game as well. After the Bills built a 13-3 lead on the Zach Wilson Jets, after half, this is how the Bills' possessions went. Interception, 3 and out, interception, fumble, field goal. And the field goal, by the way, was a 50-yard doinker to send the game to overtime. He also had an interception in the first half, so a total of 4 turnovers for Josh Allen. The Bills win the coin toss. And remember that the Bills advocated for and received dispensation from the league to change the overtime rules after 13 seconds. The league said, you're right, this was unfair. We're just going to give every team the opportunity to possess the ball in overtime unless the first team scores a touchdown. So the Bills won the coin toss. They had a chance to walk this game off. And instead, they went 3 and out. They punted the ball, and they were walked off on when Xavier Gipson took the punt 65 yards back the other way with a touchdown. Bananas game. Obviously, a great result for the Chiefs to see the Bills also at 0-1 at the bottom of the AFC with us. But, oh my God, how do you lose to a team quarterback by Zach Wilson?
To a team quarterback by Zach Wilson that you had a 10-point halftime lead on. It was just a pitiful showing by the Bills, especially the second half. But I mean, he had a first half arm punt in there too. He had a really poor play on third down that led to a field goal in the first half for their first points. Josh Allen was bad. He was bad in this game, and not just not good. He cost the team a chance. After the game, one of his viral interview answers was he said, "Same shit, different day." This is the stuff that he struggled with over the last year. He has 37 turnovers since the start of the 2022 season in 19 games. That's 2 turnovers a game. I mean, that's not MVP level. Yes, that's Jameis-esque. That's absolutely like Fitztragic type of stuff. Where it's just the Bills don't know what they're going to get from Josh Allen. They don't know which version they're going to get. And sometimes, especially when the Bills play a shitty team, which didn't happen this time, but certainly has happened a lot over the last year or two, the Bills can put it all together. They can look good. Their defense can dominate. Josh Allen gets easy throws. Guys get wide open because guys fall down in the secondary and Gabe Davis just takes a handoff 30 yards down the field. We've seen that time and time and time again. But when the rubber meets the road and when Josh Allen is either A, in a big playoff game, or B, going up against Zach Wilson, I guess, but just,
I mean, that's what made this one so weird. I mean, he didn't, it was so unnecessary.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I
don't know how they didn't take advantage. It's a
he's going in the wrong direction.
It's a division opponent that's going to win 5 games this year, if that. Sure. I mean, their defense is phenomenal, and we can't take anything away from how good that Jets defense looked. They absolutely looked like, with a competent quarterback, they could have been a Super Bowl contender. But instead, you don't need to go out and put up 40 on a good defense to show that you're a good quarterback, but you can't turn the ball over 4 times. 3 picks and a fumble is just inexcusable. And Buffalo's got to be at a pretty big come to Jesus moment with themselves right now, as far as, how much they've invested in this quarterback. Can you win not just games with Josh Allen, but can you win a Super Bowl with Josh Allen? I don't even know if they can get to a Super Bowl with Josh Allen.
No, I mean, it's getting tough because ever since he traded
for him in Dynasty.
Well, yes, that's definitely part of it. But I was going to say you can maybe trace it back a little bit before that, because I do think, like, on some level, I think the 13 seconds game broke the Bills, right?
Yeah,
like,
sure.
Let's not forget that Josh Allen was having the greatest postseason of all time, according to some. And when the Chiefs tied that game up with 13 seconds left on the clock and sent it to overtime, won the coin toss, and then, by the way, we scored a touchdown. So, like, even under the new overtime rules, we still want to walk them off. Like, you know. But in any case, I guess they have rules for the playoffs now.
Yeah, right. That's the whole thing. They didn't change the regular season rules. They just said in the playoffs if one team scores a touchdown.
In any case, I think, like, it seems like every game that Josh Allen has played in since then, he's like, oh my God, it's 13 seconds all over again.
Yeah,
I have to be the hero. And like, no, you don't. When you're playing against Zach Wilson and the New York Jets and you have a 10-point lead, you don't need to be, diving for the first down marker when it's 3rd and 13 and you have 7 yards to go to the marker. And you're just gonna kick a field goal. Like, it's bananas. It's absurd behavior. And, like, I mean, I'm not gonna say that Joe Burrow is regressing based on one game in week 1, because he always starts slow. He missed training camp. But, like, Josh Allen is regressing. Like, the regression is pretty clear. It's been a pretty clear downward arc since, the beginning of last season. And if I were a Bills fan, I would be incredibly concerned. It's not that he can't have great games and that he can't do amazing stuff. He can, but, like, the consistency is not there at all, except that he is consistently doing stupid things that are costing the Bills games.
Nick Wright, who has a lot of correct takes about a lot of Chiefs related content, as we know, has broken this down pretty well. He said, number one, obviously, Josh Allen's ceiling is second in the NFL behind Patrick Mahomes.
Sure,
when he is dialed in and running over people and throwing the deep balls and all that stuff, he looks as good as any quarterback not named Mahomes can look. But his floor is bad. It's a bad quarterback. It's and also, Nick also likes to say that Josh Allen got more credit for the 13-second game than Patrick Mahomes did, despite Patrick Mahomes not only having a better box score than Josh Allen, but winning the game. And so I do think that a lot of people think of Josh Allen as the 2020 Josh Allen, the one that got to the AFC Championship game. Their team won a crap load of games. He was not turning the ball over. That was peak first year of Stephon Diggs, peak Josh Allen performance. Before Stephon Diggs, when he was a younger player, he was not good at all. After that, he's been still good, but turning over the ball a lot. I think 2020 might end up being the outlier. I think peak Josh Allen, MVP level performance Josh Allen, might be just him in his bag for a full year. And in general, this is more of the guy that we saw out of college that had a low completion percentage, that didn't quite, there's just something about throwing the football that while he has a rocket arm, he just doesn't see the field very well. It must not, because a couple of those picks against the Jets, especially last night, were just egregious. They were just throws that he shouldn't be making, just threw it up for a grab, basically 2 arm punts and then one where he tried to fit it in this basically non-existent window in the secondary. And I just, if I was a Bills fan right now, I'd be worried. I'd be pretty worried.
Yeah, I mean, how could you not be, the way that things have been trending? So all that to say that despite the fact that the Chiefs dropped their opening night performance, which we'll talk about next, they are in position with the following scenario, which you came up with, to take over first place in the AFC with a win next week. Chiefs win at the Jags, Browns lose at the Steelers, Jets lose at the Cowboys, which seems like an inevitability. Raiders lose at the Bills, we'll see. Ravens lose at the Bengals, Dolphins lose at the Patriots. If all those things happen, the Chiefs will be the number 1 seed in the AFC, despite losing in week 1, because everything went the Chiefs' way aside from Thursday Night Football, which we'll talk about now.
There has never been a year where there hasn't been a single 2-0 AFC team.
That's crazy.
That's what that would be.
That is wild. And, probably not all of those things will happen. If you were, putting money down on a parlay on that, Vegas is probably going to take your money, but it could happen. And really, aside from the Patriots beating the Dolphins, and, Belichick is capable of anything, Yeah. They gave the Eagles a really good game on Sunday.
They did. Yeah, really surprisingly good.
And they have certainly worked over the Dolphins a few times in the past. Bill knows what he's doing. He can put together a nice little bespoke game plan. Really, that's the only game on there that doesn't seem like fairly plausible.
The second hardest one might be Chiefs at Jags. I mean, all the other ones are pretty easy.
We'll talk about that. But first, let's talk about week 1, Chiefs 20, Lions 21. We were at this game. We were in attendance. We were hyped. Just kind of give me your initial thoughts from Banner Night.
Well, they've changed pretty dramatically. I was pretty stoked going into the game, but not necessarily for the X's and O's, Chiefs versus Lions. It was more about the vibes of defending a championship, going back to Arrowhead for the first time since we saw them defeat the Bengals. A lot of fun positivity that was a little bit dampened by Travis Kelce. A couple days before that, I was a little worried about that, as we were going into the Bengals game when Travis Kelce got hurt.
Sure.
On the last play of the last practice before that game. He did, however, play in that game. But so there was some anxiety there. But in general, pregame, I wasn't super thinking about it too much. And then as the game wore on, I would have been a lot more bothered, I think, if Mahomes had looked frankly, like Burrow and Allen. If he had come out there and been, a shell of himself and made dumb throws and done, dumb stuff. And yeah, he got some criticism for leaving some clean pockets early, but I'm telling you, when your defenders or when your receivers are dropping everything that you're throwing to them, and you and I talked about this on the drive home, he's going to escape a clean pocket, because what good is a clean pocket if you can't throw the ball anywhere because everyone's dropping it or not getting open? I mean, it's been, so that was a little frustrating. But as we have just established coming into this recap right now, I tell you, I feel a lot better about this team than I did even going into opening night, even before week 1, when I thought that the Chiefs were facing a loaded AFC with maybe 8 contenders, legitimate contenders to win the AFC. And now, even though the Chiefs lost week 1, I don't feel nearly that strong about almost any of those teams. And that makes me feel a little bit better.
Yeah, I think one of the benefits of us waiting a few days to do this podcast is that we have the benefit of taking some time to reflect on what this loss meant, and obviously taking some time to watch every other team in the AFC bungle an opportunity to go up a game on the Chiefs, every serious contender that we actually have concerns about going forward. It was a fun night for those of you that didn't get to experience. I'm sure it was amazing to watch on TV, and I actually have not gone back and watched it on TV, which I feel like I need to do. I hadn't even really considered that, but I'm sure that the festivities came across great on the TV. We were down near the 50, had some great seats, a great view of the whole ceremony. It was amazing. Perfect night. The blimp was out there, which, it's not a Zeppelin. It's not, a dirigible, but it's still an airship. It was pretty cool. It looked like a big sandwich, but, it's still an airship flying around. That was doing some things for me. The Lions fans that we met, a lot of things. The Lions fans that we met were very cool and chill.
Yeah, they're fine.
Even after the game, they were pretty good to us. But yeah, I mean, the game was frustrating. It obviously was a frustrating experience to take in live, and I'm sure it was a frustrating experience to watch, almost equally frustrating to watch on TV. But at the end of the day, the Chiefs really were responsible for beating themselves in this game, as is so often the case. I described this on Twitter as being sort of the ultimate fuck around and find out game for the Chiefs. And so often when the Chiefs lose a game, I mean, even frequently when the Chiefs win games, they fuck around, and they fuck around sometimes a lot. And what I mean by that is they commit turnovers, they fuck up short yardage, they do stupid things on defense, they commit dumb penalties, they, repeatedly shoot themselves in the foot on special teams, they drop the ball, whatever it is. They fuck around for a team that is as good as they are. They fuck around a lot. And most of the time, the team that they're facing is not good enough to force them to find out. Usually, they'll fuck around a lot and they'll still win comfortably, or at least win or cover, because they're the best team in the NFL. They have the best quarterback in the NFL. They have the best coach in the NFL. They have the greatest tight end of all time. They have one of the top 3 defensive players in the NFL. They're just a really talented, good, well-coached team. And so most of the time, they can fuck around a lot and not find out. And unfortunately, this game, they went against an opponent that was good enough to make them find out. And find out they did. I mean, we have to talk about, before we kind of dive into the numbers, the figures, are different ways of breaking this game down. All the ways that they fucked around in this game. I mean, Pro Football Focus somehow has the Chiefs with only 3 official drops in this game. But I can tell you from watching the game in person and going back through it, through the week, the highlights. I mean, I think the Chiefs, you could legitimately, like conservatively, 7, 8 drops in this game. I think on the high end, you could probably say 10.
Yeah.
3 is an absurd number. I mean, it clearly is there were not 3 drops in this game. I mean, I'd say, again, like conservatively, like probably 6 or 7 or 8. The defense, obviously, or rather the special teams, allowed a fake punt conversion, which then the defense had to go back out on the field and let the Lions drive the length of the field and score a touchdown. And not just the drops, but the drops in the situations that they happen in. I mean, drops, every single drive the Chiefs didn't score was killed by a drop on 3rd down. The Kadarius Toney, obviously, drop that led to the pick 6, only the 3rd of Mahomes' career. Absolutely absurd, egregious. It was in his hands. I mean, they fucked around and they found out. That's it. That's what happened.
They did. I had kind of a funny mental picture as you were describing the Chiefs as like the exact opposite of the Patriots in their dynasty. Like
Sure.
The Patriots never fucked around.
Never.
They won games not by being more talented, not by, blowing people out of the water with their crazy antics. It was just by doing their job. That was the do your job mantra. And
sure.
And it worked for them. And the Chiefs fucking around, but being talented enough to overcome it works for them for the most part. No one would rather be any franchise in the NFL over the last 5 years than the Chiefs. Like they have been the model of winning above all else. Of everything else they've done, they've won more games, 10 more games than everyone else over the last 5 years. They've just done it. But you're right. They can't get out of their own way sometimes. And I don't know if it's just that they're so talented that anytime, like a lot of these other teams make these same types of mistakes also. They also drop the ball. They also, have turnovers and all that stuff, but they're not good enough that people, they expect bad teams or mediocre teams to do that type of stuff.
Things, sure.
Right, exactly. And so even though the Chiefs are so talented, when they make those same dumb football mistakes, it just feels like, God, don't you guys know what you could be if you didn't make any mistakes? Like, don't you see that there? And yet they still win, 12, 13 games every year. So I guess at the end of the day, most of the time they don't find out. But the 3rd down drops in this game, the McKinnon one on a wide open 3rd down, and the Toney ones were as bad as a wide receiver performance as I've seen in a while. The one on the last drive was a game winner. It was a game losing drop by Toney on that long one. And then, of course, 4th and 25, Sky drops that one. And that would have been as legendary of a Mahomes comeback when everyone was dropping everything. He didn't have Kelsey. He didn't have Chris Jones. The Lions are in town. They're a good team. They have the lead. And he could converts a 4th and 25 and then Butker kicks a walk-off field goal or whatever. Like that would have been. But I guess as you and I were both worried about in the stands, aren't you pretty sure that the Chiefs would get down there miraculously for a field goal and Butker would have shanked it? Like that was just how that night was going. So
yeah, I mean the way the night was going, I certainly had that fear. That was sort of my official prediction from the stands for how the game was going to end with the Butker missed field goal. They didn't end up getting into that position. We have to excuse a little bit of the fucking around in the sense that the Chiefs didn't game plan to be without Travis Kelce. He got hurt in the last part of the last walkthrough, and that more than almost any other type of injury situation, other than like an in-game injury, that's the hardest one to adjust to because the game plan is already in. It's set. You've gone through all the practices, you've done the installs, and so you have a couple of days to finesse it, but you don't have any practice time. You don't have guys out there. Noah Gray doesn't know that he's going to be running Travis Kelce's routes, right? Like he didn't practice running Travis Kelce's routes. He practiced running Noah Gray's routes. And Noah Gray's not Travis Kelce. He's Noah Gray. So, on top of that, Andy Reid came out after the game and really took a lot of the blame for Kadarius Toney's performance and said, look, he obviously didn't get a lot of run in training camp because he was injured, because he's always injured. And they kind of thrust him, into the thick of it. Part of that's because he was the guy getting open, so he was the one getting the ball. But, again, it felt worse Thursday night than it feels now. It feels like, the Chiefs should have won that game. Yeah, they made a lot of bonehead plays that caused them to lose the game. But, they lost to the Colts last year. I mean, they lost to the Indianapolis Colts. Literally like one of the 3 worst teams in the NFL last year.
The Matt Ryan Indianapolis Colts.
The Matt Ryan Indianapolis Colts. I mean, we're talking about, and they won the Super Bowl. So, again, especially in a week where the rest of the AFC did us a tremendous amount of favors, I can't be too upset about it. Let's break this game down a little bit more. We've got an ongoing segment, the numbers, the figures. We've got some numbers and figures from this game. I loved this one. And I usually try to do compliment sandwich. This ended up being kind of more of a compliment. We're starting with the good, and then we got a couple of bad ones. Patrick Mahomes. Let's talk about him. He's good. Not sacked on any of his 17 pressures in week 1. He has avoided a sack on 38 consecutive pressures. So he is pressured. He's threatened with a sack. He has avoided a sack on 38 consecutive pressures, dating back to last season's AFC Championship game, the longest streak of any quarterback over the last 6 seasons. So 38 straight pressures, plays where he is on the verge of being sacked, that he hasn't gotten sacked. That is outrageous. And again, when you watch other quarterbacks play this past weekend, any weekend, but especially this past weekend, there's no other quarterback in the NFL that's like that. There's no other quarterback in the NFL that can consistently escape and avoid pressure and turn it into positive plays like Patrick Mahomes.
No, they can't. We've seen quarterbacks, notably Tom Brady, that have the awareness to get rid of the ball quickly when they're being pressured. But the athleticism that Mahomes shows to escape is unprecedented. It's just such a mastery of his surroundings and his awareness of where everyone is, and he knows how quickly he needs to, he's always said 1% faster than the guy chasing him, all that stuff. That's not just a joke. That's how he competes. That's his mode. And he just has that gear that is so special. And 38 consecutive pressures without, like you said, pressures without a sack is just, he's on a heater. He's on a heater in the pocket right now, and the Chiefs need to take advantage of it.
Okay, now we got a bad one. The Chiefs had an 80% run block win rate on Thursday, which is obviously excellent. Their efficiency numbers, despite having a dominant run blocking performance by their offensive line. 23rd in EPA per play, expected points added per play, 23rd, not good. Success rate, 27th. It's out of 32 teams, so bottom 5. Yards per carry, 14th. So the Chiefs' offensive line did a great job of run blocking in this game. The Chiefs' running backs did an absolutely terrible job in this game. We'll talk about that in our next segment. But let's talk about the wide receivers. And here's our final stat. Unfortunately, we only had one good stat and 2 bad ones this week. The wide receiver catch percentage plus or minus expected, which you pulled this stat. I'm not 100% sure what it means, but I can tell from looking at the numbers what it's supposed to mean, and it's not good.
Yeah, expected is based on, this is an advanced kind of a chip, chip in the player and that type of stuff. It's not just, it's looking at
next gen stats.
It's a next gen stat. Exactly. And so it's looking at ball placement. It's looking at where it hits the player. We can think about the Toney pick six as an example where he has it in both hands. That's 100% catch expectancy there. And then their rate is what they actually did. And this is plus or minus over expected. So yeah, at the end of the day, if the number is up, that means that they hauled in harder catches than what a average wide receiver would be expected to catch. If their number is below 0%, that means that they were given easy opportunities that they did not catch. And just to break down, MVS on his 2 catches, which we will talk about, on his 2 targets, had a plus minus over expected of plus 34.9% to lead the team. So on his 2 catches, they were difficult catches. And certainly the one bomb that he caught was ridiculous and showcased his ball hawking skills, which he certainly has. Second on the team, Justin Ross on his 1 catch is 25.8% over expected.
It was a good catch.
It was a good catch. He was falling to the ground, came up with it. That was yes, it was a 6-yard catch, but again, they gave that as roughly a 25.8% chance not to catch it, and he caught it. And then we've got everyone else who's in the negatives. We have Justin Watson at negative 1.7, which is actually, Justin Watson had 2 catches for 45 yards, including a 26-yarder. But those ones, he was pretty wide open. And so even though it's a longer pass and those do have a lower expected, the longer the passes, they still didn't have defenders around him. The ball placement was good, all that stuff. But then he ends up checking in at a minus 1.7 because even though he was targeted twice, he was targeted 4 times and he had 2 that he didn't come up with. And then it just keeps getting worse. Richie James minus 10.3%. And
that's not good.
He had 1 catch for 6 yards, but he had 2 targets. So those balanced out to him. The target that he missed was obviously easier to catch than the target that he caught. And then you've got Rashee Rice minus 10.6%. He started off, as he has done in the preseason, with a drop. He had 3 catches for 29 yards, including a touchdown, but 2 targets that he didn't come up with. So his plus or minus was minus 10.3% or 10.6%. And then you've got the 2 just scapegoats, that the 2 guys that really, really screwed the Chiefs on offense more than anyone else. Sky Moore minus 61.3%. And I mean, what more can you say about Sky? He was targeted 3 times and didn't come up with any of them and wasn't getting open very much. But those 3 catches added up to a minus 61%. And then Kadarius Toney, he does have a slightly better than Sky Moore, but only slightly, minus 58.9%. And he, of course, had 1 catch on 5 targets, including at least 3 drops. Big time screw up on his part on every single time he was targeted, basically. His 1 catch went for 1 yard. It was a short one. Just an overall very, very, very poor outing by the, quote, deep wide receiver group on the Chiefs.
We have called it that, and we were taking some L's on the X app. Let's do our awards, because I don't really want to talk about this game too much more.
Yeah, everyone knows what happened.
Everyone knows what happened. We're moving on. We're on Jacksonville. For those of you who are unfamiliar with our awards, they are Always Sunny in Philadelphia themed. We've got our 5-star men, who by their play scream, "I'm a 5-star man." We've got our trash men.
I'm the trash man. I come out, I throw trash all over the ring, and then I start eating garbage.
Who, through their play, are eating garbage all over the field. Pretty self-explanatory. And we've got our wild cards.
Wild card, bitches! Yeah!
Who, quite simply, are players who are capable of anything. I will kick us off with our 5-star men, and I wanted to give a special shout-out to the guy who kicked the Chiefs to the Super Bowl in the last play that the Chiefs had at Arrowhead, not counting the kickoff, kicking the game-winning field goal against Cincinnati to send the Chiefs to Super Bowl 57, and then the go-ahead field goal, what ended up being the game-winning field goal in the Super Bowl to defeat the Eagles. That's Harrison Butker. And all jokes aside about, what might have happened if the Chiefs had given him the ability to kick a game-winning field goal, he was perfect. 2 out of 2 on extra points, hit a 35-yarder, hit a 39-yarder. All of them went true through the uprights. And, for somebody that had a really up and down season last year and had some inconsistencies specifically with extra points the year before that, I'm really hopeful that his playoff run, which was pretty much flawless, and, his health have him back to being a dominant force. And he showed that in this game.
Yeah, you can't make 100% of NFL kicks. Justin Tucker misses them, you're going to miss, right? Like that's part of the game. And I don't remember a big kick that Harrison Butker's missed ever.
Sure.
You know, he had one blocked against the Titans on Mahomes' game coming back from the knee injury, but that's not really a miss. Other than that, one kick. I mean, we're pretty familiar with, you know, Chiefs plays and games that they won and lost. And he comes up huge. He hit the 13 seconds kick, which was a monster kick. He hit the Cincy kick, which was a monster kick. You know, all the guy does is hit big kicks. So yes, while we were joking at the end of that game that it probably would come down to a Butker miss, honestly, I mean, gun to my head, I would have expected him to make it because he's a damn good kicker. So good 5-star man there. I did originally have Pat in this segment for me because he was really, really good in this game. And I feel bad for him because of the performance around him. But I shifted gears and I'm picking Spags for this one because, you know, you didn't have Chris Jones and you didn't have Charles Omenihu. And the Lions are a damn good offense. Top 5 last year.
And a damn good offensive line.
A damn good offensive line, some really nice skill players. And I kept coming away from that game thinking Jared Goff is not as bad as his reputation. Here's a guy that was picked first overall, that beat the Chiefs 54-51, that's been to a Super Bowl. I mean, he has a pretty good pedigree to him.
He does.
And despite him playing in Detroit when he got traded for Stafford, and it kind of felt like this huge step back for Detroit by flipping Stafford for Goff, like, look at these teams now. Look at, the Rams won a Super Bowl, but like, you know, they're really happy with Goff there. So all that to say, Spags' game plan for this game was pretty well executed. Yes, you knew Amon-Ra St. Brown was good. You knew that he was going to get his targets. He had 9 of them. He had 6 catches for 71 yards and a touchdown. That's fine. You'll take that type of performance on a 1A wide receiver all day long in the NFL.
Absolutely.
And other than that, you know, David Montgomery ran 21 times for 74 yards for 3.5 yards, you know, per attempt. That's fine. You can take that. Jahmyr Gibbs, who everyone is really, really excited about in Detroit, and for obvious reason, he's got a lot of star power in him, had an 18-yard run and finished with 7 carries for 42 yards. You know, that's not a we are missing Chris Jones and Charles Omenihu type of performance out of the Lions on offense. No, it's just not. No. They threw for 253 yards and 1 touchdown and ran for another. And that was it. They had 2 offensive touchdowns because their third was obviously on the pick 6. If the Chiefs get that defensive performance without Chris Jones, without Charles Omenihu all year long, they're winning the Super Bowl. Simple as that. If they don't get just mollywopped by the passing game and people running all over him and stuff like that, they're in great shape. So hats off to Spags. He knew he had a tough task coming into this game with, you know, defensive line, you know, a lot of inconsistency and just inexperience, really, more than anything. And they came across looking really, really good. The secondary held up very well. McDuffie looked good. Karlaftis looked good. Felix had 2 pressures in there, looked really good. 2 QB hits. Good performance by the Chiefs defense. Spags deserves a 5-star.
I love that. And it was great to see in week 1 because, you know, the knock on Spags has always been that his defenses start pretty slow and they kind of turn it on as the season goes on. And, you know, like this has been, not that the Chiefs haven't had some turnover, but this has been probably, without looking at snap counts and things like that, but just gut reaction, this has probably been the most continuity he's had as a defensive coordinator in terms of personnel from one year to the next. And, you know, I think it shows that performance in week 1. Let's breeze through these because we got a game to preview still. The Trashman. I'm going to go with the 2 for here, a little double dip. I'm taking Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore. They combined for 8 targets, and they came up with 1 catch for 1 yard. And that's obviously atrocious, even without the fact that they dropped the 4th and 25 that could have put the Chiefs in field goal range. The Kadarius Toney drop earlier that could have put them in position for a game-winning field goal. The Kadarius Toney drop that led to directly to 7 points for the other team because it went the other way for a touchdown. I mean, this was an all-time trash man performance by these 2 guys. There's no other way around it.
And the hype on both of them. Like, Kadarius was supposed to be the 1-1. He was supposed to be the guy on the wide receiver room. And Sky Moore was supposed to take a huge step forward this year.
The training camp hype for Sky was out of control.
I mean, and it should have been. Like, he, you know, as a second-round wide receiver and with all the tools that have been, you know, given to him with the offense, a slot receiver, there was a lot of reason for optimism, and they both just completely just dropped it, fumbled the bag. So that is That's as easy as a trash man nomination as you can get. I will go with another highly drafted Chiefs offensive player, of course, Sky being a second-round pick and Kadarius being a first-round pick, that has not lived up to any hype at all after his first career game, and that is, of course, the much-maligned running back Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He sucks. Just is not good at football. I'm sorry if any of Clyde's family ever gets a hold of this or whatever. Like, I'm sure he's a good dude. The running backs seem to like him on all of like the behind the scenes stuff we've seen. I'm sure he's a good dude, but like the Chiefs need to not be doing this whole Clyde Edwards-Helaire thing. He got the first 2 carries of the game. Like, he started the game over Pacheco, who wasn't very good in this game either, but certainly Pacheco at least is younger and 7th round pick and all that stuff, and more explosive in the Super Bowl. And he's much better player. He's a much better player. He just is. And Clyde, 6 carries for 22 yards. And it's just the way that his carries unfold. It's the running into the lineman. It's the fact that he is never a threat to hit a homer or even to hit a double. He's just not, he just doesn't get it. He doesn't have it. He doesn't have the juice, and it doesn't appear that he ever will. They threw 1 pass to Clyde on 1 target for 7 yards, which was supposed to be his whole deal. Trash me. Right. Get out of here. Just stop playing football for my favorite team, please.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about the run block win rate stats, and when the offensive line is winning in the run blocking game a majority of the time, and your running backs are still running for 3 yards carry, that's not good. That's on the running backs. Wild cards. I'm taking Marquez. Excuse me. Do it every time. Marquez Valdez-Scantling. MVS is my wild card. This was a sort of a classic wild card performance from MVS, who is the elder statesman in the wide receiver room. He's by far the most experienced wide receiver on the team. He was, by far the most experienced player on the offense, really playing among the skill players on Thursday. And he had 2 amazing catches in this game. You pointed it out, plus 35% catch over expected. I mean, 2 great catches. Mm-hmm. And he was invisible the rest of the game. Like, it was a bafflingly wild card performance for MVS to show up, make those 2 plays. They were great catches. They were very clutch. The circus catch that he made to set the Chiefs up for a score, that was a scoring drive, but he just wasn't there the rest of the game. And it's hard to understand how a player with that kind of ability can't be more consistent. So he's by definition a wild card.
Yeah, he absolutely is. That 34-yarder was funny. The Chiefs committed a penalty on that play, and instead of the Lions forcing them to get to a 4th down, it would have been a 4th and shortish, 2 or 3 or whatever. Instead, they gave him 3rd and 17, and they hit MVS for 34, which was a kind of funny little turn of events there. Definitely wild card performance out of him. He is a classic wild card player. He's very wild card just in his overall, contributions to the team. I'm going to go with a guy that seems capable of anything, but we have not seen him do it yet in a real NFL setting. And that is wide receiver 7 on the team, Justin Ross. And we've talked a lot about him on this pod, on every Chief coverage of this team over the last year. It's been about what can Justin Ross do for you? And he had 1 target. He caught it. It was a nice catch. It was plus over the expected, as we talked about. More. He was in on a couple other snaps. He was in on some goal line stuff, which we saw on his last touchdown in the preseason. Certainly capable of winning jump balls against anybody in the NFL. I would have liked to have seen a little fade to him or something designed for him specifically. But that was a drive. When he checked in there, they ended up throwing the touchdown to Rice, so no harm, no foul. But we need Justin Ross to be good on this team. It'd be a lot of fun, and hopefully his wild card performance will turn into a 5-star man before too long.
I mean, it's a great nomination, and like at this point, Justin Ross, I feel pretty confident that one of his problems is not going to be catching the ball if it is thrown to him. Like that based on what I've seen from Justin Ross, his hands are not a problem.
What is the problem?
Well, sure. I mean, yeah, exactly. But it definitely isn't the fact that he's not going to catch the ball if it's thrown his way and it's a catchable ball. I feel.
Do you think it's health? Do you think they're easing him into everything, including snaps, including?
I think that's probably part of it. I think, the relative lack of reps and lack of experience. But, Rashee Rice is a rookie, and Rashee was out there.
Right. Had 5 targets in this game.
Yeah, sure. He had 5 targets in this game. He had a touchdown in this game. I think that's probably part of it. But I think, some of it probably just has to do with skill set, too. Rashee is a little bit – she's a little bit faster. Ross is really more of like he's a bigger body, more of a jump ball receiver. And he played 6 snaps in this game. Rashee got 20 snaps. So pretty big gap there in terms of who's getting on the field more. And, Justin Ross has more years with the team than Rashee Rice does. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how that develops, how that plays out. I do think that probably the way the Chiefs deployed their wide receivers on Thursday was affected, I would guess, by the late injury to Travis Kelce, right? Because you almost by definition have to get some of the production from your wide receivers that you expected to get from Travis Kelce. And, Rashee Rice is more of a, not that I'm not saying that he is Travis Kelce, but like Rashee Rice is probably more of that guy than Justin Ross is. So be interesting to see how he's deployed going forward, but a definite wild card to this point in his Chiefs career. Let's preview this week 2 game. The Chiefs are going to Jacksonville to take on the Jaguars. Just in terms of storylines to watch in this one, the Chiefs played the Jaguars twice last year, beat them twice, so 2-0 in their last 2 meetings against Doug Peterson and Trevor Lawrence. The Chiefs won the divisional round with Patrick Mahomes on one leg. He obviously hurt his ankle in that game. Arden Key rolled him up in that game, but the Chiefs, behind Chad Henne's clutch performance in relief and Patrick Mahomes on, one good ankle, win that game 27-20, go on to defeat the Bengals and the Eagles to win their 3rd Super Bowl. They also beat the Jags 27-17 last November in just a bizarre game. The Jags, recovered an onside kick in that game. Were trying all kinds of goofy stuff on offense and really kind of had the Chiefs on their heels a little bit to the extent that the Jags were able to do that. But at the end of the day, the Chiefs won that game convincingly by 2 scores. It's Andy Reid versus Doug Peterson, one of his former proteges. I don't know. This is an interesting one. It's Patrick Mahomes versus Trevor Lawrence, who, if it's not going to be Josh Allen, if it's not going to be Joe Burrow, next man up, Trevor Lawrence, Patrick Mahomes. Here's the rivalry in the AFC. Come on down.
Right. It's always next man up, whether it's Baker Mayfield or Lamar Jackson, or, you just keep going down the line. It's like you said, it is interesting. And, it's really interesting from an early season, just matchup with 2 teams for playoff implications, that if you think about what happens in this game, if the Chiefs lose, which going on the road to a division winning team like the Jags with a really good quarterback, it's certainly possible the Chiefs lose this game. And if they do, they're 0-2, the Jags are 2-0, and they have the head-to-head, which means that the Chiefs are essentially 3 games back of the Jags with 15 to play.
Sure.
And so, they'd have to, if the Chiefs finish the year, even on a huge heater, something like 14-3, say they go 14-1 the rest of the year, right? And they finish 14-3, the Jags would have to finish 13-4, which means they would have to, they're already 2-0, so they'd go 11-4 over the last. It's going to be a tough hill to climb for the Chiefs to get a better playoff seed than the Jags if they give them 3 games right off the bat. And
especially considering the Jags are playing in
the AFC South. Exactly right. The Jags are going to win a lot of games this year, even if they're not necessarily good.
And they've already won 1 division game, but they still have 5 games they have 2 games against the Texans.
Yeah.
And, another game against the Colts and 2 games against the Titans. So.
Right. The Jags they're going to be right there in the thick of the 1, 2, 3 race in the AFC. No question about it. Even if they have a pretty mediocre year, that's how they're set up. So that being said, Chiefs playing a team on the road that is their home fans are pissed off because the Chiefs beat them in the divisional round last year, and that sucks. It always sucks to lose to a team in the playoffs, and then you get them early on in the next year in your home opener, and you want to show out for them. You want to, make a bunch of noise. The Jags, Duval, all that stuff, their crowd's going to be juiced. You mentioned Peterson, a lot of familiarity. It's a really hard. It might be the hardest game on the Chiefs' schedule. Now, I know there's obviously Bills and Bengals games and all that stuff, but like just matchup wise, where the two teams are right now, Travis Kelce coming off of an injury, you hope he plays, you hope he's 100%, but if either of those are in doubt, then find me a harder game on the schedule than this.
It's hard. I mean, we don't want to overreact to week one, but like it's certainly in terms of, listen, the Jaguars played the Colts, they beat them 31-21. So, convincing game on the scoreboard, but the Colts were hanging around in that game in the fourth quarter. And yet, based on the way that last year sort of was trending, the way that Lawrence was trending at the end of last season and the way that he started off this year, this is a tough team. So when the Chiefs have the ball, offensive DVOA, the Chiefs ranked first last year. They were, we don't really want to get into the scores this year, but they were 10th through week one, which is a little bit surprising considering all the unforced errors that they had. Jags finished 23rd in defensive DVOA last season. So on paper, obviously, when the Chiefs have the ball going against the Jags defense, this is a matchup that strongly favors the Chiefs. They should have Travis Kelce back. And, the Jags in week one allowed 280 total yards, not an exorbitant amount of yards, and 21 points to the Colts. That doesn't seem crazy, but when you consider the Colts were, Sans, Jonathan Taylor, they have a pretty bad offensive line. They don't have a lot of skill players.
Rookie quarterback.
I own all of those skill players in Dynasty, by the way.
You do.
In the IASIC league, every single one of them. But yeah, rookie quarterback making his first NFL start. This was it wasn't an overwhelming performance by the Jaguars defense in week one. Put it that way. Now, this is going to be a challenge for the Chiefs conditioning wise. Going on the road to South Florida in September is really the worst time to play on the road there. This is why the Patriots for many years had such a bad record in Miami, is because, these early in the year games in Miami, they're tough from a conditioning standpoint. The Chiefs have won their last two meetings in Jacksonville. They opened the season there, Andy Reid's first game as Chiefs head coach in 2013, and they went there in, was it 20? I think it was 2019. 2019.
They won. Sammy had 3 touchdowns,
and Tyreek Hill got hurt in that game. But the Chiefs, put it to them both of those games. So it's not like this is an unknown for the Chiefs from a conditioning standpoint, from a preparation standpoint. They've played in Jacksonville before. They've had a lot of success there before.
Twice in week one.
Exactly. And I'm expecting them to put up good numbers on offense. Like, I think the Chiefs will score 30 in this game pretty comfortably.
I agree. I'm worried about Calvin Ridley. I think he looked dynamic in this offense. 8 catches for 101 yards and a touchdown this week, and clearly has gotten a ton of hype, he's their guy. He's Trevor Lawrence's, we've said this, he's Lawrence's version of Allen and Diggs or Burrow and Chase, where you have a quarterback that, is good on his own, but you give him a guy that is potentially a top wide receiver in the NFL and he takes a level up. And that's something that I'm worried is going to happen. Worried just competitively with the Jags that they're going to be really good on offense because Calvin Ridley. Now, their defense, the Colts scored 21, but 7 of those were on a weird, fluky brain fart type of play where the ball's on the ground. No one knows it's a live ball. The Colts pick it up and run in for a touchdown. So they only gave up 2 touchdowns to the Colts, and otherwise would have beaten them. The Jags had the ball at that time, so maybe something more than 31 to only 14. It could have been one of the bigger blowouts of the first week. It didn't happen. But the Chiefs also could have scored a touchdown on the drive that they gave up a free pick 6 and could have beaten the Lions 28-14. So, things could have looked different on one play on both sides of this. It's going to be an interesting matchup. It's going to be something where if the Chiefs defense is anything like we saw in week one, if they're 75% as good as they were on Thursday night, I think the Chiefs are in great shape. And if Chris Jones coming back revitalizes them, gives them some juice, comes out there as an emotional leader like we know he is, sky's the limit here for what the Chiefs can accomplish from this point forward.
I'm going to be really interested to see how much Chris plays, if he plays at all. I have to imagine he's going to be out there because he obviously said last week that, if the Chiefs had signed him the day of the game, that he could go in and play. it will be interesting with him, not having been in camp, not having played week 1, and the game being in South Florida, how the Chiefs feel about rolling him out there. I can't imagine that he's going to play a full complement of snaps. But, even just as a situational pass rusher, he has the ability to really affect this game. He came really close to getting his first playoff sack against the Jags last year, and then obviously ended up, finally breaking his drought against the Bengals, 2 sacks of Burrow. The Jags last year had the 10th best offense by offensive DVOA. The Chiefs were 14th on defense, but the Lions were top 5 offense last year. So the Chiefs have already faced, now granted they were doing it at home in front of a home crowd, a raucous home crowd, on banner night. But they held a top 5 offense from last year to essentially 14 points. The pick 6 doesn't count against the defense. And they did that without Chris Jones. So, like you said, if Chris Jones gives them anything at all and they can duplicate what they did in week 1, I don't see why they can't win this game. But it is going to be a tough performance on the road. They are going to have to do something about Calvin Ridley. He was a factor in week 1, 8 of 11 for 101 yards and a touchdown. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what happens here. Do you want to talk about predictions, or do you want to just kind of let it ride and we'll talk about it after it happens?
I mean, I've been pretty, in my mind, I always see the potential of the offenses more than the defenses in every matchup, even against the Chiefs. And I tend to lean, as I did in the Lions prediction when I predicted a 48-42 shootout. I tend to lean towards shootouts. This game, I am leaning the exact opposite. I think it's going to be lower scoring than what we're used to out of the Chiefs. I know they just put up 20. That's kind of the range I see this game final, whether it's 24-21 Chiefs or 20-17 Jags or, wherever we are. I think it's going to be high teens, low 20s for both teams. I think it's going to be a close game that comes down in the fourth quarter.
I'm going to go with Chiefs. I'm going to predict Chiefs win. I like predicting a Chiefs win. We want a Chiefs win. But I'm going to say that it is, I don't know. I think they could score 30 in this game, but I do think, just in terms of the pace, both offenses in this game, the Heat in South Florida, let's go with a repeat of the playoff final score. I'm going to go 27-20 Chiefs. We'll see you all next week.